Good morning, everyone. Here's the AM update for May 26th. Again, thank you all for what you guys donated for the live last night. I'll have another live coming up. I'm not sure. I got to look at my schedule, though. It'll probably be this weekend. It might be one of the more informal ones I do with my wife, but a lot of people have fun with those because we kind of joke around, talk about our travels and our histories and cool places and things because I've been all over the place. And I do talk a little geopolitics, but it's more candid stuff. My wife gets into more of the metaphysical thing because she's very witchy and pagan type and does a lot of those things. So it's kind of a lot of fun at a different pace. But I'll let you know, and then I will also do another more formal geopolitics live as well. I'll keep those updated. But we raised $402.78. We had two donors give $50 and one gave $200. It's amazing. And I will be donating that stuff to Action Against Hunger when I get off work this evening. So getting to the updates on the battlefield, Russian shelling of the industrial city of Luhansk is continuing and it's growing exponentially. Excuse me, not Luhansk, of Severodonetsk in Luhansk, according to the Ukrainians. In the next week will be very important. They seem to be trying to soften up the city to take it. They've been moving through Popasna to try and do a pincher move. And if I get home early enough, I'll try and do an operations update tonight. They're continuing to force operations into Lyman, which is in northeastern part of Ukraine, as a part of the top area of the pincher move. But trying to link Lyman to Popasna to kind of surround Severodonetsk as their current operation. It seems like that battle has started, at least the artillery portions of it. Russia has said it would open humanitarian corridors, allowing for foreign ships to leave via ports from the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. But the Russian Defense Ministry said that Ukrainian grain export would not be allowed to leave until Western sanctions against Russia were lifted. So I'm not entirely sure they're going to let Russian grain leave, or maybe Russia's just going to steal Ukrainian grain and call it theirs and then ship it. Russian Defense Ministry said the corridors would be open from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily and that it would be safe for foreign ships to move through the corridors. Russia's spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says that we absolutely reject that the accusations are Russia's fault. That on the contrary, they blame the West for taking a number of illegal actions that have led to this blockade. So they're blaming the West. It's complete nonsense. It's their ships doing it. So asked whether Peskov meant that Western sanctions need to be lifted in order for grain supplies to resume, Peskov said they must cancel those illegal decisions that prevent the charter of ships and the export of grain. Those sanctions don't affect that. They're saying that because they want people to think our sanctions are causing this shortage or this blockade. They're not. A blockade is a military operation, not an economic operation. They are blockading the ports with military warships, not with a lack of funding from the world. So, to be clear, it's not sanctions causing the blockade of Ukrainian grain. It's Russian warships, and those warships are going to cause lots of hunger around the world if that grain doesn't get out. Russia has slashed interest rates yet again as the ruble continues to stay strong. It's buoyed by robust oil and gas revenues. So a long time ago I said the ruble would crash, but I'd also assumed that the gas and oil industry in their country would be severely hit. That's just not the case. There's countries in Europe that are still buying a lot of their gas and oil, as well as potential sellers in Southeast Asia. So Russia had cut interest rates a couple times now. I think they're surprised by how well their economy is holding up as well, given what's going on. But it is merely the energy sector that is propping it up. Everything else is kind of crashing around them. And over the long term, this is not sustainable because there's just not going to be any tech to come in to repair and rebuild and do things that an advanced economy would need. They're going to rely heavily on energy exports, so they might as well just be exactly like a Middle Eastern nation that doesn't really produce anything for anyone other than natural resources. According to the United Nations Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, will plan to visit Moscow in early June to discuss the situation in Ukraine, as well as to discuss the ongoing humanitarian crisis pertaining to potential food insecurity because of the war. And I'm of the opinion that the UN needs to stop doing this. Putin loves the groveling from the UN, and no offense to the UN, but there's no way to enforce or inflict pain on Russia or Putin within the UN body. They just don't have any kind of strength or any kind of claws to dig in at Putin. So their negotiating point is weak, and it's just bolstering his ego, Putin's ego. So, however, Turkey is in negotiations with Russia and Ukraine to open a corridor via the Bosphorus Strait for grain from Ukraine, according to senior Turkish officials. I'm not sure what the negotiation points are. I'm hoping that it's not negotiating allowing more Russian warships into the area, because that would be somewhat concerning. If they're opening up the Black Sea to the full Russian Navy, so humanitarian aid could get out, that just means that Russia will eventually get enough combat power to conduct an amphibious operation against Odessa, which for the long-term strategy of this war is very bad for Ukraine. It would essentially create that bridge to Moldova, and we would be looking at a potential invasion of Moldova in the future as well. To Putin's credit, the depth of his evilness shows no bounds, and because of that, he's getting what he wants when it comes to holding food from the rest of the world, unfortunately. In a video message Wednesday, President Zielinski said, "No matter what the Russian state does, there's someone who says, let's take into account its interests. This year in Davos, it was heard again. Despite thousands of Russian missiles hitting Ukraine, despite tens of thousands of Ukrainians being killed, despite Bucha and Mariupol, despite destroyed cities, and despite the filtration camps built by Russian state in which they kill, torture, rape, and humiliate like they're on a conveyor belt, it seems that Mr. Kissinger's calendar is not 2022, but 1938. He thought he was talking to an audience not in Davos, but what was then Munich. By the way, in the real year 1938, when Mr. Kissinger's family was fleeing Nazi Germany, Mr. Kissinger was 15 years old. So pretty scathing remarks from Zelensky at Kissinger's want for him to kind of give Russia concessions. Zelensky went on to say Russia has done this in all of Europe, but still in Davos, for example, Mr. Kissinger emerges from the deep past and says that a piece of Ukraine should be given to Russia. I agree with Zelensky. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced the launch of a new joint UK-EU-US group to help support efforts of Ukrainian Prosecutor General to document war crimes and other atrocities committed in Ukraine. The new mechanism, called the Atrocity Crime Advisory Group, will provide strategic advice and operational assistance to war crimes units of the OPG and the legally constituted authority responsible for prosecuting war crimes in Ukraine. Although the United States and Secretary Blinken said, although the United States and our partners are supporting a range of international efforts to pursue accountability for atrocities, the OPG will play a critical role in ensuring that those responsible for war crimes and other atrocities are held accountable. Now, I'm personally not sure how this will work in the realm of the international criminal court system, but the difference is unlike the ICC, the nations in this group forming the investigative body of this group have militaries that can physically go out and grab war criminals. So we'll see. Russia's war in Ukraine is forcing the European Union to look for alternatives to Russian gas imports, which amount to about 40% of Europe's consumption every year. Qatar and other Middle Eastern countries seem to be stepping up and playing a part, but it will cost more. Russia is claiming they have 8,000 Ukrainian POWs. No word on how many Ukrainians or how many Russian soldiers Ukraine currently holds as prisoners of war. Russia's oil production is expected to decline by about 140 million tons, not billions, 140 million tons from last year. This will cost roughly $116 billion or about 16% of Russia's GDP. Russia is starting to feel the sting of Western sanctions in its retail sector as it devolves into a second-hand economy dependent on poor substitutes, where shortages are starting to reflect what it looked like in the Soviet Union. They may be able to find purveyors of some Western-made goods and components in friendly countries such as China and India, but Russia is increasingly determined to make its own, returning to a policy of import substitution that yielded a vast globally uncompetitive network of businesses within Russia that suffered heavily after the Berlin Wall collapsed. So at least in the retail sector and what consumers want, Russia is suffering, but in their energy sector, they clearly are not seeing as much pain as we had hoped. And that's all for today. I'll be in the office, so I'm probably not going to be online very much until this evening. Again, thank you for your donations. Have a good day.